Whoa! Hello, everyone. This is Chris Sawyer, Sommelier to the Stars, your friend, and the Varietal Show. We're back. I'm here at Gravenstein Grill. I got my great friend Shane Finley, the great winemaker whose brand you just saw, Shane Pinot Noir. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm happy to say, Gravenstein Grill, this is a very special date for us because tomorrow we actually open to the public once again after the SIP shelter in place has been not lifted, but we do have a lot of outdoor seating, so I'm excited to say that there will be a lot of people outside tomorrow, including myself for lunch and for dinner, and very excited about that. And it's great to have Shane here because he's been here many times as well. So Shane, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here at a neighborhood haunt.
Absolutely. So Shane and I have known each other for, almost 2 decades. You know, Shane's a great winemaker, probably first best known for what you did at Costa Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really helped put them on the map, to be really honest. I mean, you were one of the great people behind the #1 wine, the Wine Spectator, and you've done so much since then, including your own great brand, which is the Shane brand, and we'll talk about, we'll do a different segment with his other brand, and you'll find out about that, because that goes way back to his childhood and all this stuff. It's awesome. But you're doing a Highway 37 right now, the 37 brand,
right,
which is kicking butt in every competition that those wines are in, and I'm judging them. I'm like, oh, not surprised that 37 wines are going great, but you sell this because this is your heart and soul. This is the Shane brand. Tell everyone a little bit about your background and how you started making these wines.
Sure. Well, I started Shane in 2006. I was working for Costa Brown Winery. I was the associate winemaker there. I don't have a degree in winemaking. I have a degree in English from the Virginia Military Institute. I spent a few years working for an insurance company in New York City after I graduated college in the late 90s. And then after a few years of cubicle life, I decided that I wanted to do something a little bit different and quit my job and moved to California. Packed up all my belongings, came out here to Sonoma County. I worked for a small winery called Copan Wines in 2001. They were really tiny operation there, running out of a small little custom crush that they were also operating. A bunch of different fun small winemakers there, and I was immersed in pretty much all of the A to Z of winemaking. And then after that, I spent a few years kind of traveling around overseas, Australia, Côte Tea, came back to California in 2003 and just worked my way up the ladder. I spent a few years again with Copan, then Paul Hobbs, and Costa Brown, as you mentioned, all with the goal of trying to start my own wines, do my own brand, wanted to be my own boss. But as you know, the wine business is glacial, it's slow. When you're here in the 707 area code, it seems like everyone and everything's very apparent, but once you leave, it's a big country, as we all know, and it takes a while to get the masses aligned with what you're trying to do, what your vision is. So we started out in 2006, first year, we made about 6 barrels. And then over the course of time, we're now coming up on, this will be vintage number 14, we'll do anywhere from 50 to 70 barrels a year. Chris mentioned my other label. I have another label called Constant Disruptions, which comes from discipline slip. When I got in 6th grade, the teacher wrote me a disciplinary note, and I started a new brand off that. It's kind of an offshoot of Shane Wines, where we do some different varietals and different fermentation techniques. We do some different regions. But Shane Wines, over its course of its tenure, has become mostly focused on Sonoma County. We do Sonoma Coast, Pinot Noir, Russian River Valley, Pinot Noir, a couple of smaller bottlings, and then we do a rosé of Pinot Noir.
Speaking of rosé, pink stuff, rosé every day, my friend.
Cheers. Yeah, this is the perfect shelter-in-place wine.
So here we go. I did a story on this past year. Your last vintage was in a story I wrote for the Somm Journal. It was a great story, and it's kind of a little bit about how you transition from doing a Syrah-based one to going back to Pinot Noir, which everyone knows Pinot Noir here in Sonoma County. It's our trademark, just like Napa Valley has Cabernet Sauvignon. But you've always been great with Syrah, but you felt this was the time to make that transition and really go into Pinot. Tell everyone a little bit about that.
The rosé really it really traces the arc of my career as far as Shane wines goes. So, and really career since I started. When I first got into wine, I was attracted to Syrah. It's really my first love. That's where my heart lies. And when I started working for Copan, the winemaker there had spent some time in the Northern Rhone.
Yep.
So we were really philosophically aligned as far as what we were wanting to do and the types of wines we'd like to drink, which is most important.
Yeah.
And that's where when I went overseas, I spent my first overseas vintage in Nebraska making Shiraz. Then I went to Côte Rôtie and spent a year working in those vineyards making obviously Syrah. We did Côte Rôtie, we did San Joseph, and we were dabbling in some other appellations. So when I came back to the States and when I was kind of thinking about my own wine label, Syrah was how I wanted to start it. So if you go back to 2006, we made 3 Syrahs, all 100% whole cluster, all very minimal new oak, all kind of minimal extraction, very spicy Rhone representative Syrahs. And so as I was making the rosé is a Saignée method, so we take the juice off. We don't buy grapes for rosé. We use the bleed juice for the rosé. When the first few years it was mostly Syrah. It was all Syrah, and then as we started making Pinot Noir in 2009 under the Shane label, that's when I started bringing in a little bit of Pinot. And now we've kind of flipped a little bit where Shane is mostly Pinot Noir, and thus our rosé is mostly Pinot Noir.
Right.
Also, I will say Pinot Noir rosé, when it's done really well, is a little more vibrant, a little lighter color, pops a little bit more, and that's what we have in this one. So you have that kind of that vibrant salmon, light salmon color. You get the kind of, for me, the Sonoma County Pinot Noir rosés always have this kind of saltwater taffy, watermelon.
It's exactly the
strawberry.
first 2 things I was going to say is watermelon, almost rind. It's almost like that last bite of the watermelon, not the big juicy part up here, but that part near the rind, because it does have that little bit of saltiness to it too. It's almost that saline, almost what we call, sea foam, like somehow, which the ocean is that way about 10 miles. It's kind of coming towards us, and it affects what we do here in Sonoma County. And I feel like this is a great example of a super dry style, and that's what we really are doing here in Sonoma County. This is one of my favorites. It has been for years when it was the Syrah version, and it now in the Pinot version. This is the new vintage, and I'm loving it.
Thank you. I mean, we really try to make the wine bright, fresh, crisp. We ferment it in stainless steel. Try to get it out pretty early. It's only 3 months from the initial bleed until we bottle it. It's a wine that's meant to be shared with friends. It's a great summer wine. It's really versatile in its food pairings. You get a little more fleshiness in California rosés than you're going to get in European rosés. But we really try to balance that out with not doing the malolactic fermentation to keep the bright, fresh fruit flavor there.
Yeah, that's great.
Acidity as well.
So the next wine obviously is one of his trademarks. This is La Reine, and
Rennes.
La Reine.
So it's the queen in French, and the rosé is ma fille, which is my daughter.
That's right. That's the one I know a little bit better. So what's the difference between the 2?
So this is our Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir. It comes from the Petaluma Gap. We do a couple of different parcels in the Petaluma Gap. Basically, what we're trying to do, we do a Russian River Pinot Noir, and we do a Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir. Russian River, as you know, Chris, or red fruit driven, a little more lush palate, a little less kind of tan and grit to it. Sonoma Coast, darker fruit, blue-black fruit, more tannin, more structure, and the spiciness, I feel like, comes from more of the green spice. Like I'll get kind of like a tarragon, a star anise possibly, sometimes a little kind of bay leaf quality. So we take this dark fruit characteristic, we layer it on with those kind of nice, kind of supple tannins and the green spice, and that's what we have our Sonoma Coast. And the nice thing about it is when you have the 2 wines, you can buy both, compare them side by side. You're going to get really good representations of what's happening in both appellations.
So it goes from my daughter to the queen. So you're saying that that's her development as a girl too.
Or it's for my wife, which I think is
probably more.
So, and also, it really was a wine that we kind of named for my wife, but also just kind of the noble, regal qualities of Pinot Noir.
It really has a characteristic that I like too, which is a blue fruit characteristic. There's a little bit of a boysenberry, not quite huckleberry, but a little bit of blueberry too. And I feel like that's really something from, especially out in this area, if we were looking at Freestone Occidental or the Petaluma Gap, those are the areas where you're going to find it that are part of the the Sonoma Coast appellation, with Petaluma Gap being part of Sonoma Coast appellation, a smaller part of it. I've always argued that Freestone Occidental should be its own appellation too, but we don't need to go there right now.
Yeah. Sonoma Coast is very diverse, and you mentioned Petaluma Gap, and this is where the kind of the southern sections. If you're looking at the map, the town of Petaluma, wind and fog influence from Tamales Bay. Typically one of the later ripening areas in Sonoma Coast because it's low-lying, very foggy, very windy.
Yep, absolutely.
And it creates, like the Pinot Noir there has a little thicker skins, so when you ferment it, you're going to get a little more tannin. We add on a little bit of whole cluster fermentation to this wine as well, which helps kind of create some structure, a little tension, a nice kind of grippiness, and I think really helps push the wine through on your palate, but it also adds some age-worthy characteristic to the wine.
I agree. No, I think it's great. I mean, what are your favorite pairings so far with these? I mean, these are young wines, but what have you been eating lately with these two?
Well, since we're at home, we're kind of doing a lot of takeout, and we're just getting whatever we have, kind of little rudimentary meals. But I always love any sort of shellfish, fish, salmon, scallops, that kind of stuff with the rosé, tuna tartare, stuff like that, kind of perfect. Ceviche, things like that works great. Pinot, I'm definitely a pork tenderloin type of guy. Chickens, if you're out, hopefully a place like this will be open pretty soon where you can. I'm not a great cook, so I won't be making duck at home, but that kind of stuff, a little fattiness in the meats. That does it. I don't go a little heavier than that, but these are big. California Pinot Noirs are a little that you can ratchet them up with your food pairings if you want.
But once again, this has got some great minerality to it. It's got some backbone minerality. And it's got that little cutting edge, really nice acidity in there too. That makes it very, very lively in the mouth. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this bottle. There's a lot of stuff going on with the stuff that this man makes. Great wines. Shane Finley, the man of the hour.